Hi guys, welcome back to the Art of Server. So I finally got a replacement motherboard for the R720XD that has been giving me some problems. Basically I have an R720XD that it would fire on, but it would get stuck in the middle of post. And I had gotten a replacement motherboard because I think that's probably the quickest way to resolve this problem. But unfortunately that motherboard had a lot of problems. And so I had to return that, and then I ended up getting this motherboard from another vendor. So far, just from a visual standpoint, this motherboard is in better condition than the last one, where not all the screws are missing, and the tabs for the mini monolithic slot are fully intact. So that's good. And it didn't come with the CPU covers though, so I don't know. I don't know why people keep shipping motherboards without protecting the pins. It just seems kind of ridiculous because these things are not very expensive. I have a whole stack of them. So I immediately put them on. The pins look okay, so I just immediately put these on. But anyway, so far, at least from a visual standpoint, I think the motherboard looks okay. This is supposed to have the iDRAC 7 Enterprise license on it, but I don't know if that's true or not until I actually install it and power it on and check it out. So anyway, all right, let's go over to the R720XD, and first thing we got to do is remove the old motherboard before we can install this guy. So let's head on over to the server. All right guys, so here is my R720XD. I just took the lid off, and we're gonna be taking out that motherboard underneath all this. So all right, I'm gonna set up the camera on the tripod so I can kind of free both my hands, and we'll get started on replacing this motherboard. I'll have to admit, this is actually the third time I'm shooting this video. Had some technical problems where the mic ran out of juice, and also I had a lot of let's say lessons learned the first couple of times trying to remove this motherboard. So you might be wondering, what am I doing showing you the front of my server? And that's because, trust me, this is going to make it a lot easier for you. If you have the R720XD, you want to remove the backplane. And so in order to move the backplane, we're going to have to take out all the drives. I'm not going to remove them entirely. I'm just going to slide them out just a little bit so that it'll release the backplane and we can take that out. Initially, I didn't think you'd have to remove the backplane to get the motherboard out, but trust me, it's going to make your life a lot easier once you have the backplane out. It gives you some room to move that motherboard around. So anyway, guys, do me a favor, since I've been doing and redoing this video several times here just to make it the best video for this tutorial, do me a favor and hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and to help me out here, okay? All right, so let's get started and just slide the drives out. If you don't have any drives in your server yet, then probably this doesn't matter, but I already have some drives in here because this machine was actually in use prior to the motherboard having problems. So, all right, so I've pulled the drives out about an inch or so. That should release the SAS connector where these drives are plugged into the backplane. And so we should be able to take the backplane out. So let me adjust the camera to another angle, and then we'll start taking out the rest. All right, so the next thing we want to do here is remove the air shrouds. And I'm going to remove also the fan wall here. And so there's just these tabs on the side. We'll just have to pull them up. Can be a little bit tight. And then as you pull them all the way up, it'll release the whole fan wall. And then we can just pull this out. Okay, next, let's get the PCIe risers out of the way. So these just mostly just pull right out. So the R720XD has 3 risers. So it's got plenty of PCI slots. One of the things I love about this particular server. Okay, the next thing is unplug any I/O cables in the back. So I've got a VGA video, I've got a USB for the keyboard, I've got an Ethernet cable for the NIC, I've got an Ethernet cable for the iDRAC, and then this is the LED cable for the cable management arm. Okay, so everything's released here. This is not strictly necessary, but I do find it easier if you can take whatever NIC card is in here. So I'm going to go get a screwdriver and remove these. Okay. Let's pull this out. And so this is going to reveal that this motherboard you see is sitting on a tray, and that tray is hooked in right here. So being able to see that helps when you're installing, uninstalling. You don't strictly have to do this, but I find it easier to have the that NIC card removed. All right, so the next thing is we got to disconnect a whole bunch of these cables. A lot of them are connected to the backplane that we're going to remove. And so we want to just disconnect all that so that we can get the backplane out. Let me pull some of these cables right now because you should be able to see this from this angle. So, okay, this is the SAS cable from the front backplane to the rear flex bay. So this is going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt. So if you don't have the rear flex bay, you don't obviously not going to have that cable, and it's going to be a little bit easier. But this is also going to get in the way of getting the motherboard tray out. So this is kind of a little bit of pain in the butt. If you don't have this, it'll be really easy to take the motherboard out. We're going to have to contend with dealing with this thing here later on. But all right, let me go ahead and unplug this cable, which I think is a power cable, from the motherboard to the flex bay backplane. I'll just kind of put that there. And then there is a data cable. And these have a little latch on the side here, so you want to make sure you press on that latch as you remove the cable, otherwise they're plastic and it can break. So if you want to avoid breaking any cables. There is also a flat cable here to this, looks like an SD card reader in the back. I'm going to disconnect this. This has, let me kind of show you, this has two release latches on the side, so you want to make sure you press down on those as you pull that out. Again, a lot of plastic connectors, so they're a little bit fragile. You want to be gentle with that. And again, this is, I think, a signal cable from the rear backplane to the front backplane. All right, and then I have a cable that, I think this is a signal cable for the front backplane to the motherboard, similar to this one to the rear backplane. So this also has a latch. You want to make sure you're pressing down on that. All right, so latch on this side, key on the other side. And one more cable down here. I'm not sure what this cable is for, but it also has a latch. You want to press down on that while you pull this out. So all these cables are plastic, or the connectors are plastic, so they can be a little bit fragile. Just keep that in mind. All right, so I'm just pulling all these cables out of the cable management channel right here. Okay, so this cable is actually also connected to this location down here. And in order to get that out, you need to remove this channel here. So there's a little release latch over here. You want to pull this and slide it forward. This comes out. And then there's this little pull tab on this cable. And so that gets the rest of the cable out. So there are a couple of power cables from the motherboard to the backplane. There's one here and one over here. So we want to disconnect those. So there's also a released latch on top side of this connector. So I'm pressing down on it and just kind of trying to wiggle it out here. Let me take this cable out of the cable management hook there. Just give me a little bit more. All right, there we go. And I'll also take it out of the backplane side. And that's just because it gets in the way of these other cables which I need to release. All right, so here is power cable here. Again, let's get it out of the cable management hook. Pressing down on it, wiggle it out. Also going to remove it from the backplane side. Okay, so the backplane has a couple of connectors that connect to the rack ears because there's like LEDs and the power switch and stuff like that. So one of them is over here, and this has one of those very delicate ribbon cable things. And so you have to pry this connector down, and then you should be able to pull this cable up and out of that connector. I'm just going to fold it out of the way so that when we pull the backplane out, it's not going to hit it or anything like that. All right, there's one more connector on the other side here. All right, so the other cable that goes to the left side rack gear is this one right here, and this one's a little bit easier. There's a little pull tab that you can just yank on. So I'll do it on my other hand so you guys can see this. But basically, I'll hold the backplane down, just kind of tug on that, and then it comes right off. And again, I'm going to fold this out of the way so that when we pull the backplane out, it doesn't catch onto it. Okay, so I think everything connected to the backplane, all these cables that we unplugged are connected to the backplane. And I'm going to just get them out of the, oh, actually, you know what, hold on. Before I do anything, let me take the SAS cables out. All right, so I'm just going to remove the SAS cables on the backplane side. And I'll show you how the other side comes off the motherboard too, but let me just kind of keep that out of the way for a second. And some of these cables here are connected or are inside these cable management hooks. So when I pull the backplane out, I don't want those to hold the cable down. So I'm just going to release them from the hooks like that. And then there's one more. This one's a bit of a wide cable, so it can be a little bit harder to get out, but just if you do it carefully, it should come out just fine. Okay. Now, while you're doing all this, one thing I would caution is that there are SMD components on the back of this backplane, so you don't want to accidentally knock those components off. So just be a little bit gentle and careful. All right, so at this point, I believe the backplane can come out. And so I'm just going to make sure to get these cables out here, especially this long flat one. And I think, yeah, all the cables. So now I can just press on this latch right here and also on the one on this side, and then just pull up a little bit and then push it towards the rear. And this should come right out. Okay, so I'm going to put this whole cable bundle and the backplane aside. All right, so the reason for doing all that, by the way, is you want this extra space right here because these plastic thingies, or whatever you want to call them, on the side here can hit the backplane and it'll hinder your ability to move this motherboard tray. So I found the first time I attempted this, I tried doing it without removing the backplane, and it was just a real pain in the ass. And I think removing the backplane is worth the effort. It'll save you time in trying to get the motherboard out later. All right, so let me show you how to get the SAS cable that goes to the motherboard off. All right, so this is the SAS cable that was going to the backplane. So I'm gonna just get it out of the cable management channel here. And this cable is a double cable, dual cable, as you can see. And it basically merges into this one giant connector over here. And there's a release on this side, on the opposite side here. So I'm just gonna press on that and then I'm gonna slide this connector this way. All right, so then that comes right out. So the idea is that this motherboard sits on this metal tray inside the chassis. And so you actually don't have to remove any of the screws to get the motherboard out. This whole tray is going to come out. And so this is the release latch over here to that tray. And then there's also another handle here that can assist you in kind of gripping this tray. So first I'm just going to pull this up and I'm going to slide it forward. Oh, sorry guys, I forgot one step. The power supplies are connected right now, so I gotta release the power supplies. You'd think I remember this after the third time, but okay. All right, so power supplies are disconnected now, and yeah, I don't think there's anything else. So let's try this again. So pull this up, slide it forward to the front of the server. All right, so that comes out. You can see that it releases itself from that hook there. And now comes the slightly tricky part. In the R720, or actually any of these R720XD or whatever, if you don't have the flex bay, it's fairly easy to pull the motherboard out at this point. But what I've discovered after trying to attempt this a couple of times, reinstalling the motherboard and all that, you'd be tempted to like just kind of pull this motherboard out. But the thing is, on the side of the chassis here, there are these pins that prevent you from pulling that motherboard straight out on this side. So you kind of have to remove the rear side first and then slide the motherboard out towards the rear to kind of bypass those pins. Problem is, so you'll see right here, let me just kind of demonstrate this, but when you try to pull this up, this sort of kind of gets in the way. So, and then this flex bay drive cage, this looks like it's riveted on, so it's not something that's going to be easy to remove. Dell doesn't really have any instructions on like how to make this any easier, so, but this is what I've discovered is, so yeah, if you just try to pull the rear out, it's just kind of gets stuck here a little bit. So what I've found that makes this a little bit easier is you kind of angle the backplane kind of this way a little bit. So I'm kind of grabbing on the heatsink because this hook is not going to help me in that regard. And that kind of gives me a little bit more room. Yeah, okay, so you see that? So by going at an angle, I can kind of get around this. If you look at Dell's video, instructional video on how to remove this motherboard, they just kind of pull it out like it's easy peasy. The first couple of attempts I did this, this was a major pain in the ass. So I've kind of figured out this procedure here that I think works. So hopefully that helps any of you guys out there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and just get this motherboard out, and let's go ahead and put in the new motherboard. All right guys, so here is the new motherboard. And again, just like I took out the previous motherboard, I'm gonna kind of go in at an angle this way, and that'll help me get past this. So you see, that was fairly smooth. Okay, so let me just position the motherboard to slide into position. All right, so I think at this point I should be able to just kind of slide it forward. All right, and you can see that goes in, and then this pin will just lock the tray in. And so the motherboard's in. Now we just have to reverse everything and install all the backplane, connect all the cables and stuff like that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get that backplane back in here. So here's the backplane with all the cables still attached. And let me just kind of flip the cables over here. So I'm just going to slide this down, and at the point where these latches on the side make contact with the chassis, you have to squeeze these in a little bit, and then go all the way down. And yep, so there you go. Just press it all the way in, and it latches in. So now we got to reconnect these ribbon cables to the backplane and then reconnect all the other cables as well. Okay, so I'm gonna get this ribbon cable here and kind of snake it back into where it was. And it's a little bit of a delicate cable, so I'm just gonna be a little gentle with it and use my tweezers here. Okay, I think that's in there. And all right, so we're just gonna close the little plastic thing. All right. I really hate these kind of connectors. If you guys ever taken apart a cell phone, they use all these connectors and they sometimes break. But okay, I think that's in. All right, let's go do the other side. All right, this side is a little bit easier, but let me just get these cables out of the way first. So this cable just kind of comes in here. I'm gonna route it kind of like this, I think. Well, no, let me just let it loose first. So you just basically, this one's easy. You just have to press it in. So just line it up correctly. And then all we have to do is kind of press in and it's there. Okay. So I think I can maybe run, I don't know, I need to make sure it doesn't get in the way of the SAS connector over here. So, you know, so I have to, I guess, consider how I'm going to route this cable. Maybe I'll just leave it like this, and that way it won't get in the way of that SAS port right there. All right, so these cables go back to the other side. So I'm just going to route them behind this plastic shield. Okay, so there's this long flat cable. I'm just going to get that into these cable management hooks again. And usually I want to do this one first because it's the wider cable and it's just a little bit harder to get in. All right, there we go. And make sure this side is still fully seated in, because as you're manipulating this cable, it can kind of come loose. All right, so got it under there. Then I'm going to run it. Actually, you know what? Let me get these out of the way for a second and run this. I find that you want to run this cable kind of at the very bottom. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and plug it in on the motherboard side right there. And there's this other extension to it that I'm just going to leave on the side for now. And then let me put these two cables in here as well for now. And then there's this long one. And okay, so this goes all the way to the connector over here. So I want to make sure that that's long enough for that. And then I'm going to channel it into the cable management hooks and under this heatsink here. And at this point, I think I'm going to get these power cables back in. Now these power cables are labeled with a little thing that says BP for backplane. See if you can see that. Okay, and then the other side is labeled MB for motherboard. So you want to make sure the motherboard side goes in the motherboard, which would be here. And the backplane side goes to the backplane right there. And then I'll also try to tuck this into the cable management hook there. All right, let's do the other one. And again, this says motherboard. So we'll plug this over there, and this goes to the back plane, which is right here. Plug that in, and also try to tuck this into the cable management hook there. All right, so next thing is, let me get that SAS cable for the backplane to the motherboard, and I'm gonna route this under the heatsink, which is I think how it was before. Okay, plug that in, and then plug this side in. And I'll finish routing the other side later on. Let me just connect a few other cables here. Before I move forward, let me just plug the FlexBay cables into the motherboard. So this thing goes into the port that's covered right here, so I gotta get this cap off. This is, I think, like a data cable. And this is keyed, by the way. This is keyed on this side with a latch on this side. So it only goes in one direction. Plug that in. And this is the power cable, so it's going to go to the motherboard. And this also is keyed and with a latch on this one side here, so it should only go in one direction. All right, so got those plugged in. Before I hook up these cables, I need to put that cable management thingy here, so let's go ahead and get that. All right, so here's that cable management thing, and there are these two pins right here and here that slide into the holes right here. See if we can get that in right there and right over here. So you kind of have to slide it in from top. It goes down and then slides over. Also, this side here fits into this little hole over here. All right, so that clicked in. So now I'm just going to route this flat cable first over here, and it goes all the way to the back. All right, so this cable, I'm just going to let it sit flat down here and plug it into this, what looks like an SD card reader. And this has latches on the side with a key on the top middle. So that goes in. All right, so the first or the next cable I'm going to work on is this one that goes into the connector down there. And so let me just route it in the cable management channel first. And this is also has a latch on this side. Okay, so it's going to go in like that. Let me just, all right, clicked in. All right, so this is the backplane signal cable, I believe. And so that goes in the connector right over there. This is also keyed and latched. So make sure to plug it in the right way. Okay, and then press it all the way down until it latches on. Okay. And then there's one more cable here that is a signal cable, I think, to the from the front backplane to the rear backplane. And so that just goes over here, and this is latched on with two sides and also keyed as well. Okay, this is not reaching far enough. Let me adjust that a little bit. All right, so the next thing is the SAS cable that goes from the front backplane to the rear backplane. All right, so this cable plugs into the front backplane, and then I'll route it through there, out through here, and then just plug it in right there. With all, I think that's all the, oh, one more cable. Let's hook up the mini monolithic cable here. All right, so I'm just gonna route these SAS cables into this channel here first. And you do wanna make sure that these cables are neatly seated in this channel, mostly around this area, because this is where the fan wall is gonna go down. And you don't want that fan wall to pinch anything. All right, so I think as long as they're behind this plastic cable or cover or whatever you want to call it, the fan wall, when it comes down, is not going to contact the cables. Okay, so on this side, we're just going to do the reverse of what we did. Slide it in. And make sure you press it all the way in until you hear a little click. And that click means that the cable is securely in there. Sometimes people don't plug this in all the way, and you'll notice that you're missing a couple of SAS lanes to your backplane. All right, so that takes care of that cable. I think at this point we can start putting the risers back in. All right, so I'll start with this riser here, riser 3, put that in. Let's do the next one. And then finally riser 1. Okay, so that's all in, and let me also get that network card. All right, network card is in, and I'm going to plug in some of these cables here in the back. The VGA cable, the USB cable, I have my Ethernet cable for port 1, have the cable for the LED and the rack management arm, or the cable management arm. All right, so let's go ahead and put the fan wall back in. So when you put this in, you want to make sure that the fans are flowing towards the rear of the server. And I should just see here. Yep. Some of these cables here are not all the way down, so all right. All right, so just slowly and gently press down on these. Now I find that because as you're pressing down the fan wall, it's actually reconnecting all the fans, and so sometimes that can resist. If you just kind of wiggle the fans a little bit like that, it helps let it seat down. All right, so yep, there we go. So these fans are fully modular and removable, and so when it's pulling down the fan wall, it's reconnecting all 6 fans there. All right, so next thing is the fan shroud, but I gotta still install the CPUs. But anyway, that should hopefully help you guys out in terms of installing or uninstalling and installing the motherboard in the R720XD. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel and you like this sort of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if you want to support my channel, go check out my eBay store. I'll leave a link down in the video description below. I've got the best selection of pre-flash IT mode HBA SAS controllers for your TrueNAS, ZFS, or Unraid build. So go check it out down in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and have a great day. Bye-bye.